Welcome, everyone, to Unit 6, Lesson 3. Today, we're going to be talking about the events that will lead up to the Civil War. For your essential idea, we're going to be talking about how sectionalism is going to rise during the 1850s and eventually bring us to the brink of the Civil War. For your essential question, you're going to be determining the acts of violence that will occur during the 1850s that will predict the start of fighting in that Civil War. As we pick up in 1853, we're going to see an event that will not necessarily lead to violence, but will still increase sectionalism, even for a small reason. This will be the Gadsden Purchase, a land purchase of a small piece of territory in modern-day New Mexico and Arizona. The reason for the sectional tension rising during this time period is because the South wanted to build a transcontinental railroad, or a railroad that would go from the East Coast to the West Coast. There was already talks of a northern route, but the South wanted to be able to control the railroad. They would do this for a specific reason. The South wanted it because they thought it would lead to future Southern states, which would help them expand slavery. But the North did not want the South to be building that railroad. They wanted a northern route, and for the most part, to prevent that spread of slave states, going back to the main issue that we saw last week. As we move into 1854, we're going to see a new act be passed in Congress, that being the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which will allow two territories, the Kansas Territory and the Nebraska Territory, to decide using popular sovereignty whether they wanted to allow slavery in their territory. The main reason why this ended up becoming an issue is because this would provide the North with the Transcontinental Railroad, but would also allow the South to potentially expand slavery above the 3630 line that we saw in the Missouri Compromise of 1820. What this would do is this would be the final repeal of that Missouri Compromise. Something that had been in our country for over 30 years and had helped to lower tension at the time is now going to be completely abolished. This would provide the North with the Transcontinental Railroad, but now a decision must be made. Do we allow slavery in those territories that were originally not going to allow slavery? As a reaction, the North is going to be furious with this, because this will allow slavery to expand above where it was previously prohibited. Northerners and Southerners are all going to move to those territories, fighting for control of it to determine whether it will be a slave state or a free state. One other thing that will occur during this time period that was not expected is that the Whig Party, or the party that had originally controlled the North, is going to split over this issue, and a new political party will form. That political party is the Republican Party. This will round out the two major parties that we have today. The Republican Party will form with your anti-slavery Whigs, your anti-slavery Democrats, and the Free Soilers coming together over their hatred of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. They will all form into a fusion party that will become the Republican Party, which will exist for the main part only in the North. The Republican Party platform is simple: do not allow slavery to expand to the West. The Southerners will see this as a threat to slavery, particularly because it becomes a major party in the North. But the Republican Party does not have some of the same reasoning behind the prevention of slavery expanding as we saw in the Free Soil Party. The big issue that happened with Kansas-Nebraska Act is the effects that it would have on the people and into conflict. Abolitionists and slave owners would all flock into Kansas, and this would spark a contest known as Bleeding Kansas, an effective civil war between those abolitionists and slave owners in the territory of Kansas. This will show that popular sovereignty fails as a concept because people cannot agree over the issue of slavery, and they're willing to fight over it. Even though we are still about 6 years away from the first shots of the Civil War starting, This can almost be seen as the beginning of the Civil War because we have the Northerners and Southerners fighting over the issue of slavery. As you see in the image, you have slavery literally being shoved down the throats of people, murder being provoked and pushed onto people, and some will not like this concept. One of the individuals that we're going to see is a man by the name of John Brown, an abolitionist who's very much against the system of slavery and is willing to use violence to end that system. In the Bleeding Kansas incident, John Brown will murder 5 slave owners at that time period. He's going to have other views towards slavery that we'll see later in this lesson. To some, John Brown is going to be seen as a hero. To others, he's seen as a terrorist. This dichotomy between the two sides is going to end up causing a major split within the country. Another incident of violence that we'll see is the caning of Charles Sumner, a Northern senator who will give a speech called The Crime Against Kansas, in which he will denounce slave states, particularly that of South Carolina. A congressman from South Carolina, Preston Brooks, will nearly beat Sumner to death with a cane over his remarks. As we see this play out, the North is going to be outraged at this because a statesman is going to be nearly killed over the issue of slavery. The South is going to be happy with it. And Preston Brooks, the man who attacked Charles Sumner, will actually be sent gifts of canes by Southerners, including a golden cane. All of this shows that violence is breaking out, whether it is in Kansas or even in Congress. And this will foreshadow the Civil War. As we move into 1857, there will become a new major spectacle, a national story, that being the Supreme Court case, Dred Scott v. Sanford. Dred Scott, a slave, was taken into a free territory by his slave owner. Once he was in that free territory, Scott would sue, claiming that he was now in a territory in which he could not be enslaved and he should be freed. Overall, it seems like a good argument. But once the Supreme Court makes their decision, it's about the worst thing that you can expect. There are 3 parts to the decision. Each one gets progressively worse as we go down. The first claimed that Scott was property and not a citizen, and therefore he had no legal right to sue. The second was that the Constitution must protect people's property, including that of slavery. And the third, and the most troubling for Northerners, is that slavery cannot be banned in any Western territory because the federal government must provide that safety of property. And because there's no state right and it's controlled by the federal government, they must be allowed in there. In the North, they are going to be angry because now slavery can legally exist in any Western territory. This also means that many of the legal arguments that have been tried or approached in ending slavery seem to not be able to work. In the South, they're going to love the ruling because it gives them much more territory than they ever thought they'd have access to. In that same year, you're going to have a Republican by the name of Abraham Lincoln running for Congress against a Democrat by the name of Stephen Douglas. During that race, you're going to have Lincoln and Douglas debate several times over the issue of slavery. Lincoln is going to ask Douglas how popular sovereignty or the voting for slavery can work, since Dred Scott ruled that slavery cannot be banned in any territory. Stephen Douglas was a major proponent of the system of popular sovereignty in the lead up to that decision, and he's going to be put into an awkward situation. As a result, Douglas is going to give his famous Freeport Doctrine, in which he claims that slavery could be allowed in every territory, but that we don't have to pass any laws to protect it. This is going to mean several things. While Douglas is going to be able to win, him and the Republican Party are going to gain in popularity in the lead up to this. The South is also going to be afraid of the ideas of Lincoln and other Northern Republicans. In 1859, we're going to see a reoccurrence of John Brown and his views towards slavery. John Brown and his sons are going to attack the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, where many of the military weapons are stored. His idea was that they would steal these weapons, provide them to slaves, and then start a major slave rebellion. He thought that the second that slaves heard that there was an attack, they would flock there to help. The problem is that Brown was stopped, captured, and executed for his crimes. The abolitionists in the North saw John Brown as a martyr, but in the South, they feared that this was a Northern conspiracy and an attempt to attack slavery. With this, tensions are at an all-time high, and we're very close to reaching that breaking point, a breaking point that will start the Civil War. We will talk about that breaking point tomorrow. Thank you guys. I will see you then.